Hello, everyone. This is Alexandra from River Dragon Mystic, and today we're going to be covering the Sun conjunct Saturn in a composite chart and what it means. If you don't know what a composite chart is, to put it simply, it's the chart of a relationship between two people. And in a composite chart, what the Sun represents is the life force between the two. It's also our expression and our energy, so you can see if somebody is going to drain or boost your life force by looking at the composite chart. And Saturn represents the responsibility, the limitations, obligations of the connection. It can show how committed we actually are, and it can also show the overall goals and what the connection would like to produce. So if you have Sun conjunct Saturn, that basically means they're sitting right on top of each other in the chart. So this is one of those aspects that when I see it in a relationship chart, time just seems to stand still for a moment because I can immediately recognize that this relationship is very, very important. If you come across this, it doesn't promise romance, it does not promise bliss, so don't get carried away with all that. But what it is truly is a lot bigger and a lot more important than that. The way I see it, and I've actually experienced this aspect personally, so I will be giving some actual real life examples of how this plays out is that these people are sent to come together by God or the universe or whatever you believe in to accelerate the karmic evolution between the two people. These are the types of people that can change each other's lives forever. And there is a divine reason and purpose for this connection to even exist at all. So when we're talking about karmic work and dealing with karma throughout your life, this is a very nuanced and complicated thing to get into. And it's very common for people's assumptions about each other when they first meet to not really be correct with an aspect like this. So it's good to keep an open mind as you get to know this person. Don't have a lot of expectations on the connection and know that this relationship will teach you very deep things about yourself. Overall, Saturn represents a ledger of karmic debt and duty that each person carries with them from lifetime to lifetime. I kind of imagine him as a very hard, cold accountant. And the sun is one of the planets that represents the soul, your self-esteem, your ego, and your identity. So essentially, what this is doing is it's shining a light, which it would be the sun, onto our flaws that we need to work on, which is Saturn, to spiritually evolve ourselves. And this is not love and light type of stuff. It's not twin flame type of stuff. Like, don't get carried away, like I said. And it can actually be kind of a painful aspect because we're dealing with Saturn. The process naturally causes the two people in the relationship to examine parts of themselves that they may be very insecure about. And depending on the state of their ego, relationship astrology is always very nuanced, right? This can be taken as helpful, constructive criticism, which would be ideal, with actual value, or it can be seen as a painful and undermining experience. So, in my opinion, it can be very helpful to consider what dasha or perfections you were under at the time, transits, and any other astrological influences that were going on for you at the moment that this person came into your life. Interestingly, for me, I came across two people that changed the course of my life forever. during my sati sati, which is when Saturn transits over your natal moon. What I also find helpful to understand regarding what is actually going on here is to examine the natal charts of both individuals. So look at what house is their Saturn in, and does the other person activate that house in any sort of way? So, because Saturn is involved here, this aspect can add longevity into the connection, though it is not always guaranteed. You have to look at everything in the chart. Sometimes, if the connection can no longer teach the two people anything more, it will just dissolve and end. So I will give you some actual examples of how this played out in my life, and this is how I like to teach astrology, like real life theory, real life experiences over theory. So my first example is actually very literal in my opinion. I have Saturn in my eighth house natally, and the eighth house relates to occult studies and astrology. And a person who changed the course of my life was my very first astrology teacher. I had seen a few of his videos on YouTube, and his level of detail and the way he described things was very impressive to me. And I reached out to him on social media asking if he would be open to tutoring me. And the way that I was pulled to do this felt very impulsive. I'm a very introverted person, and that is not a normal thing for me to do. I'm just talking to random strangers on the internet. And I never expected him to even reply to me, but he did, and we ended up meeting on Zoom. And when he decided to teach me, I only had a very basic understanding of Western astrology at the time. And watching him read charts was this really great experience. He was a very kind teacher, but sitting in those lessons made me feel very insecure, big time, and very bad about myself because I was realizing in real time that even though I had done many hours of reading and studying, my working knowledge was basically zero. I couldn't read charts for other people at that point in my life. And he made me realize that a lot of the information I had studied was totally incomplete, and some of it was just plain wrong. And he made me realize that my dream of becoming an astrologer was much farther away than I had anticipated. But through this, he held me to a higher standard, and he destabilized my ego in the best way by pushing me to study harder and to try harder, to be more conscious of where I'm getting my information from. And he showed me that astrological work could be applied to so much more than I ever could have imagined. My second example, I also consider pretty literal as well. Again, this was a Saturn in the eighth house experience, but this time it related more so to trauma and psychology, which is the realm of the eighth house. This person I actually met at a music festival, and he is still in my life today, and it's been 6 years, I think. Um, the day that I met him, it was a very similar experience to meeting my first astrology teacher. There was this pull that I felt to go to this particular stage at this particular time, surrounded by 5,000 people. And when I saw him, I felt I needed to talk to that person. And this was not normal behavior for me. I'm super introverted, you guys. Like I'm a hermit. And a few years down the road, I remember this phone call we had, and he asked me point blank, "So what kind of trauma do you have?" And we both shared some of the most awful things that had ever happened to us. And throughout my years of knowing my friend, he actually has taught me more about psychology and nervous systems than any therapist I've ever hired. There have been times when he has actually called me out on my own subconscious patterns, and this was very destabilizing for me. It made me feel very insecure, made me feel very down on myself. But I trusted him, and I knew that he wasn't doing it to bully me. And throughout our friendship, I am very grateful for everything that he taught me about myself, and I'm grateful that I didn't turn away from him. I know that I wouldn't be the person I am today without him. You can probably tell that both these examples aren't exactly romantic in any kind of nature, but if you do see this aspect in the seventh house in a composite chart, it can indicate a committed relationship. And if that's something that you are considering, please be prepared that it will not be easy. Okay. And it can actually feel quite restrictive, but working through those hardships will pay off down the road, as Saturn always tends to do. And delayed gratification in this case is gold. If the relationship actually lasts, that will depend on the maturity of the two people involved and, of course, the condition of the entire composite chart. So, if you have experienced this aspect, recognize that this is a very rare opportunity for you to evolve yourself. And I would love it if you could comment down below what house your natal Saturn is in and how this aspect has played out for you so that we can all learn from practical examples. Tell me more about what house it was in the composite chart if you've encountered this. This aspect is not common, so don't take it for granted and let me know what your experience has been with it. I would love to learn more from you guys. So thank you, and I hope to be releasing more videos in the future.